This is to introduce you to an analysis that we normally conduct, which we call the recall consistency. So I coin it recall consistency or food frequency recall consistency because it captures the consistency of respondents during a food frequency questionnaire recall. So this study is a study that we are conducting, or we started conducting about 2 years ago, and it's a study that a longitudinal study on the relationship between diet and hypertension. So this study began, like I said, about 2 years ago, and we basically selected over 400 participants in different local governments in Ibadan, and we followed them up with regards to their diet. So here you can see the different diets um, that the participants were consuming. So we followed each participant with the diet. This is a participant at a particular time. This participant you can see is B033 at time 1. You can call it time point 1, and the same participant at time point 2. It's good to know that the difference in time was less than 2 months. So imagine we go to a local government, say Akinyele local government, and using the food frequency questionnaire, we ask the participants, how often do you normally consume these foods? So earlier on, they give us a list of all the foods. So we have a total list of all the foods that the participants consume all year round. So you can see over 167 or 166 foods. And so having obtained that list, you now ask the participants, yeah, so how often do you consume these foods all year round? So you see for this participant, 6 times 24, 12, 11, 0, for all these foods. So the recall consistency is all about trying to find out how consistent is the recall of the participants at the two time points. And the idea is that a very high recall consistency, that is about that's about 70% or zero point 0.7, is considered to be good, and a low recall consistency that is less than 70% or zero point 0.7 is considered very poor. So here we see that for participants B033, 60%, which is fair. So it means that, yeah, when we went to the participant the first time, we didn't quite get exactly the same response. So, which is quite important. So if you look at the responses here, oftentimes they were quite the same, but not for all. So, for example, you see um, with with the whole milk consumption, the first time the participants um, reported that he or she consumed whole milk 264 times in a year, and the second time 360 times in a year. So also for evaporated milk, the first time, the first visit, the participant reported that he or she consumed evaporated milk 264 times in a year, and the second time 24 times in a year. So all those differences is what leads to an inconsistency in the report, and we need to measure it. In science, we have to measure everything that is related to the outcome of our research. And in this case, you recall that we're interested in diet and hypertension. Diet being our exposure and hypertension being our outcome. Okay, so how do you interpret this? If you look at the different respondents, so respondent B032 has a recall consistency of 0. Why? Because there were some foods that were just not consistent. So take, for example, in the second visit, this participant reported that he or she consumes cooking sauces 540 times in a year, and in the first visit, 0 times in a year. Similarly, if you go down, you'll see all those foods that lead to the inconsistency. So in the first visit, the participant reported that he or she consumed beef meat um, 0 times in a year, and the second time 540 times in a year. So all these things were what contributed to an inconsistent result or response, and in this case 0%. So how do we treat this? We cannot use this participant's result until we find out if this is truly a reflection of the participant's consumption or it's an error. So the Cronbach alpha coefficient is a measure in statistics that we use to measure this consistency. So we move on to the other foods or other participants. So if we look at these participants, B061, a consistency of 60%, B065, a consistency of 70%. Interestingly, B014 has a consistency of 100%, and this is really ideal. We go on and on and on and on and on to for the different participants. So in total, we look at the average consistency, and in this case, we have an average consistency of 70% or zero point 0.7. So if we are looking at our study and we're looking at the responses from participants about their food consumption, we can say that we have an average consistency of 70%, so which is fairly good. In your data collection, you'll be also doing this. You'll be measuring at different times the dietary intake of the participants, just so that you can compare their response at multiple times. And you need this to be able to calculate the consistency. And this will give you more confidence to know, more confidence to be able to say that yes, um, your findings are actually correct, or they are more accurate. Why? Because the response from the food frequency questionnaire from your participants are consistent. So you want to then say if you find a relationship between diet and hypertension, that your findings are more likely to be true and not as a result of errors based on the inconsistency of the report of the diet. Thank you.